Hello, everyone. Hello. That's beautiful sunny day. Thanks for staying that long. It was long conference day, but I'm going to talk about Turkey and Syria mapping response today. So I'm Said. I'm part of OpenStreeMap community Turkey. I'm part of Yercizenler, which is the organization raise awareness of open data, OpenStreetMap in Turkey. I'm a geomatic engineer, passionate OpenStreetMap editor. I've been contributing project more than 10 years, and I'm so happy to be here and giving this keynote speech. I didn't sign up for this, but I'm so happy that I'm doing it. Thank you. And thank you to all for helping us to save lives with the open data and open source tools after disaster in Turkey and Syria. I also want to thank all the contributors and from Yercizenler who helped me as a team that we respond disaster in Turkey. I just want to ask if my teammates can just stand up, and I just want to give them shout out. Batuhan, Orkut, Can, Oğuz, where are you? And those guys, can you stand a little bit more? This project wouldn't be possible without those people. They were spending like 15 hours every day for a month for this mapping response. And with the coordination, with the mapping, with the data structure, with the coordination, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I just want to share. Yes, please. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. So this is the map of Turkey. I'm not sure if you are familiar with the Turkey, and this is the epicenter of the earthquake. So on 6th of February, 3 a.m., Turkey and Syria hit one of the most powerful earthquakes in their history. It was 7.8 magnitude, and it affected 13 cities in Turkey, 60 in Syria, and more than 13 million people were impacted from these earthquakes. All right. The map of Turkey may not sense maybe to you where you are from, I don't know. Last week I was in US and they asked me, where are you from? I said, Turkey. What is it? What is that? So they have no idea. In case I just share some map here, so you can see the fault line where the epicenter happened. This is the east part of Turkey, and then you can see also Syrian border in comparison to other locations. And then, so basically the fault line was that long from Manchester to London, and almost all the country from the South Korea. Does it make sense? That was destructive. That was difficult to coordinate. And that was one of the reasons that we lost so many lives and we have so many injured people. Yeah, destruction was real. And that's the only picture which we can see. Unfortunately, I couldn't be there physically and then supporting the coordination on the field, but pictures were horrendous. Cities were flattened. It was scary. And all of the people whom I know, they went to the area, they got a trauma. They couldn't adapt the social life. They questioned their lives. That was the scale of the event. That's only one aerial imagery, but imagine that 13 cities pretty much like completely flattened. All right. Unfortunately, we lost more than 50,000 people after this disaster in Turkey and Syria. Those are not only numbers, those are lives, those are families. Each of those numbers are affecting like so many lives. And more than 120 people need to continue their life with the injuries and disabilities. 5.6 million were displaced, and they cannot really live anymore at their houses. Either they're relocated to elsewhere, or they're staying in the temporary houses. Cool. Today we are going to talk about how we respond this event to help saving lives with open map data and open tools. By the way, just want to give full disclosure, none of us has experience to respond disaster. In that sense, HUT just play important role to coordinate and support our mapping response. We had the passion, we had the motivation to help people of Turkey, people of Syria, but we didn't have a background of like disaster response. Massive thanks to Humanitarian OpenStreeMap team and all the disaster responders and all the community again. The overall goal of our mapping response to complete open geodata infrastructure of the event area. As I mentioned, that event area was huge, and unfortunately, the event area wasn't mapped at all. So you are seeing map of Kahramanmaraş, where is the one of the epicenter. Basically, there was not only one earthquake, there was consecutive of them. One of them was like 7.8, another was 7.5 magnitude. It was an aftershock. It was two massive earthquakes. And this city has 1.1 million people. And as you can see, not this one, this is after we mapped. So there are like hundreds of buildings which represent all the 1.3 million people in this city. This Kahramanmaraş wasn't alone. There were like 13 cities in Turkey and then 6 more in Syria. Here you can see after all the geo infrastructure, open map data infrastructure was completed, including buildings and missing roads. Our overall goal to complete geodata infrastructure before and after the event. If we would have ready for this disaster, we would have already this buildings mapped and missing roads were mapped. But unfortunately, it wasn't. When you are responding emergency, it's so hard to prioritize. And yeah, we're gonna talk about it in the challenges. All right, why do we need geodata? Any thoughts? Why do we need geodata? Without accurate and complete geodata, planning, rescue effort, humanitarian response, recovery response, and then understanding the damage are almost impossible. You need geodata, you need map to start with. What if you don't have a map? Yeah, you have no option, you have to map. Because rescue teams were looking for a building data. Rescue teams were looking for a collapsed building data because cities were completely flattened. They don't know where to start with. They don't know how to plan it. That's why we need a map. Humanitarian efforts, humanitarian responders wanted to help, but they don't know where to start, which city to start, where to locate humanitarian help, where to send their stuff. They needed a map. So we need to map. Recovery planning was critical. So more than 13 million people were impacted. I'm not saying that they lost their lives, but they were impacted. They didn't have houses. They need shelter. They need food. And then, so they need temporary place to stay. And then, what are the best places to build a temporary sites? You need map to understand where to locate those temporary sites. Also, to document the damage of the destructive earthquakes, you need also map to associate where you had the most damage and then what's the scale of the damage. In order to structure all of those requirements, we needed a map. So we have to map. All right, the task was so big. We need to create a geodata infrastructure before and after the event. And here, now I'm going to talk about what we did. We did 4 things to basically cover all the requirement of rescue teams, humanitarian responders, recovery requirements, and then to basically understand the size of the damage. We did 4 things. We mapped unmapped buildings and missing roads in the event area. I just want to remind you the size of the area, which was a big task. We wouldn't make it without help of global community of OpenStreetMap and open source. And then we create collapse building maps because rescue teams were looking for a collapse buildings, where to dedicate, where to allocate rescue efforts. When it's emergent, you have to map. You need to find a way to map collapse buildings. Researchers and then humanitarian organizations were trying to understand the damage and size of the damage to basically help all the people who are impacted from the disaster and earthquake. And then we built damage assessment map for the researchers, for the humanitarian organizations. And we mapped temporary sites and POIs to basically understand what infrastructure were heavily damaged and impacted. Can you imagine, like, you don't have pharmacies, and then you don't know like how many of them were survive, and what are the like wash points where people need to be relocated. So we need to map temporary sites and POIs. Sounds like so many work, right? It wasn't easy. Okay, here you are watching all the mapped buildings in the event area. So here all the way from Syria up to central East Turkey. More than 2.5 million were mapped in a very short time. Earthquakes happened on 6th of February, and after like 10-15 days, all the infrastructure were ready. And we prioritize areas where there is a destruction in the downtowns of Hatay, Kahramanmaraş, Adıyaman. All right, buildings were essential, but there were more essential map features that we need to map. So we mapped more than 48,000 kilometer unmapped roads to help humanitarian efforts to basically get to the area where most of the navigation map will not operate due to lack of internet and connectivity. And I don't know any other disaster response where more than 9,000 volunteers were activated. I hope we will not to activate those amount of volunteers once again for any area, but we appreciate their effort. All right, we created open map data infrastructure for the event area in terms of buildings and missing roads. So those buildings and roads were there now. But this is only way to starting. We need to deliver data to rescue teams to basically go to collapsed building and help people to get under rubble. Can you imagine the pressure? People's lives are depending on you. Just tracing buildings. Checking like drone imagery or satellite imagery visually and then just digitizing it. Have you ever think that contributing OSM would be that meaningful? Absolutely. Absolutely. Here you are seeing map of Hatay, and those collapsed buildings were digitized from drone imagery. Guess what? We didn't have access to satellite imagery immediately, so we need to acquire drone imagery as well. Another city here, Nurda, another town, which is fully flattened. That was one of the city like highly impacted. So the second deliverable we basically delivered to community and people of Turkey and then people who are impacted from the earthquake was collapse building map. That saved lives. We will see some more. We will see how data has been used. All right, I will keep going with damage assessment map. Collaborating with government wasn't easy. And then open data is not something everyone knows in Turkey. That was difficult. Government release addresses of places based on their damage level, but that was only addresses. It doesn't give you any insight. You know number of collapsed buildings? 10,000. 10,000. Does anyone remember how many people lost their lives only in Turkey? So that number I saw, I present, that was including like Turkey and Syria. So this data set was created from governmental data set. 10,000 collapsed buildings. That's what we know. And this map was shared with everyone publicly. More than 10,000 people view it. And 65 researchers use this data to understand and estimate the damage in Turkey. And this data was also used as a training data source for some AI damage estimation. All right, we just talk about damage assessment map. SafeGraph is a company, was generous to share their Turkey POI data with us. And then by complying the OSM map editing guideline, we mapped all the pharmacies in the event area, ATMs, bakeries, supermarkets. Those are really essential. And then you can have an idea of like what's the impact and then you can overlap this data with collapsed buildings and then get a bunch of insights. On the right-hand side, you are saying just park. That was park, but now it's home. It's home for thousands of people. And one of our tasks was also mapping temporary sites. So we did 4 things. We mapped buildings and unmapped roads. We mapped collapsed buildings. We built damage assessment map and make it available for community and researchers. And then we mapped POIs and then temporary sites in the event area. All right, how we did it? That wasn't easy. So we structure our work into work streams. You will see like remote mapping was a really important part. Otherwise, we wouldn't make it possible with limited OSM editors. And I will talk about all the work streams in details. So for each of the work, we use different data sources. For mapping unmapped building and roads, we use meta-generated ML roads and also Microsoft-generated buildings as a data resource. And then we use HOT Tasking Manager for coordinating collaborative mapping effort. And all data was available on SM. Whoever you are, you can just access. Then for collapse building, we collaborate with Research Institute in Istanbul Technical University and then Copernicus Emergency Management Service and MapLory imagery for validating the collapsed building's location and use MapRoulette to organize our tasking. For mapping temporary sites, we use OpenAerial map and then SafeGraph and then task for distribute MapRoulette and those editing tools were used. All right, we talk about imagery. Accessing imagery wasn't easy. 3 days after the event, we had a cloud coverage. Acquiring satellite imagery with Clearview wasn't possible. Drone imagery was lifesaver. Drone imagery saved lives. For imagery coordination, our superstar like Batuhan just jumped in and reach out all the satellite imagery providers and activate their open data program and then share data with us. And then help NGO collect drone imagery in the area. And all the imagery were consolidated in OpenAerial map, and then we use Contour's mosaicing tool to make this data available on OpenStreetMap. All right, so you are seeing on the right side, UN's Disasters Chartered satellite imagery request. Only a handful of amount of those imagery were available for community with Creative Commons license. That's something we really need to address. When people are under rubble, I don't know. So we had also volunteers and partners on the field. They were collecting street-level imagery for validating collapsed buildings, as well as they were using Cobalt toolbooks for collecting data and then validating the collapsed buildings. We wouldn't make this possible without global community activation. And then we worked with global community across the world, and then all of the contribution made this possible. Thank you so much. And then Lale from MSF coordinated global community activation. International coordination. In the disaster response, you need to use tools which are accessible for everyone. You cannot use fancy project management tools or communication tools. You need to be really simple to make this accessible for everyone. And international coordination was critical. Thank you, all the partners who help us to make this possible. We also run daily coordination meetings. We had a stand-up every morning. We host daily mapathons every evening. And then we were growing a Turkish community and training because we need mappers. All right, this is the map which was used by the rescue team to save lives. And all the brown buildings you are seeing here, those are coming from OSM. So I'll quickly move to challenges. Accessing geodata was one of the biggest challenge for us. We didn't have geodata available, so we need to map. I already addressed this post-event satellite imagery issue. This is open to discuss. I'm happy to give feedback further. And licensing incompatibility with ODBL. So you have an imagery, you can see it, but you cannot share it with the community. That was difficult. Prioritizing the scope of emergency was hard because the size of area was so big. And we need to be brutal to prioritize the areas. Data validation was beyond our scope. Massive thanks to Humanitarian OpenStreeMap team for supporting us with the data validation as well. And then there was almost no awareness around OpenStreetMap at governmental level or local NGO level. And we were trying to explain governmental officers what is OpenStreetMap. That was extra work for us. All right, lesson learned. Now we are running preparedness projects for being ready for any kind of disaster strikes. And then we are working on emergency mapping response plan. And then we are identifying key stakeholders where this data might be useful for future disasters. And we want to show power of OSM to everyone, which we learn after this disaster. Yeah, we are working on trying to find a way to request emergency drone imagery, either create our own team or teaming up with drone communities. Yeah, you need really talented and advanced mapper when there is a disaster. They need to own work streams and projects. Otherwise, high number of volunteers will not mean good quality of data. So we want to invest building advanced mappers community. And then that was really hard to remember. We need to pause and rest. We are a human. And then we need to avoid burnouts and take a moment, take a walk, take a run, that we could sustain this emergency and recovery response longer and sustainable. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I hope that was helpful.